PR is reputation management. So in reputation management, you have creating the voice and face and the storytelling and the narrative, and then protecting that along the way of the growth of the company. And marketing, on the other hand, is sales.
I'm sure some people will come for you marketing and sales, there's a lot of conversations on LinkedIn these days. You just go and you scroll, and marketing, sales are going neck and neck. They are very, very, there's a fine line between marketing and sales.
And I think the meeting point is this trust factor.
All right. Clara, welcome to the Colorteam Podcast. This
Hi.
has been an amazing journey, how we first met at the Malta EU Summit earlier this year in May. And, just before we came in here, you were mentioning about how, it's funny that we met amidst 5,000 people. And, we made it right down here to Warsaw. Welcome to Warsaw. It's your first time in Warsaw? No?
It's actually my second time. I had forgotten that I'd been here before. I was here incidentally for a music festival. So
Yeah. When was that?
It was 9 or 10 years ago. I was living in London, and I don't really remember the name of it. Neither do I remember what part of Warsaw I was staying in.
10 years ago.
Yes. So, but today I'm really glad to be here, and it's really 24 hours in Warsaw to be here on the podcast with you. So thanks again for the invite.
Amazing. All right, let's jump right into the first question. You run Third Eye Media, right? You've worked with the likes of Legora, Wise, Netflix, So Rare, but also VCs like 500 Startups and Atomical. How did you get into PR and coming to founding your own agency?
So I actually started my journey studying political science. And as a student of political science, I had to read the media a lot. So very early on, I realized, that the media was sort of oriented, that there were editorial directions from different newspapers. And so I started understanding that the news isn't always treated in a completely neutral way. So I got interested in that. And when I graduated from my political science school, my first job out of university was in a PR agency in Paris. So I was working for some big brands right in the get-go, like General Electric, Dassault Systèmes, Thomson. And after about a year there, where I kind of learned the ropes of media relations, I moved to London and joined Google. So I was at Google for 4 years, doing product PR across Europe, where I was quickly able to ramp up my usage of languages, and was essentially doing PR for Google Books and Google News, which were two problem children products at the time, where there are a bunch of lawsuits around Google. So after 4 years there, I jumped ships and I joined Accel Partners. This was 2012. Accel Partners had an office in London, was one of the few California VCs with a European base at the time. And so I was actually relaying some of Europe's very first funding announcements, as well as profiling the partners at Accel. So it was an in-house job. I kind of created this comms function inside Accel, which was quite a pioneer move for a VC, especially in Europe at the time.
So it was non-existent before you came in?
Yeah, so the London office at Accel wanted to have a comms function to be able to support some of the investment activity that they were sort of deploying. And they also wanted to be able to have resources to profile each of the investors. That's one of the unique things with a VC firm, is that as opposed to a startup or a scale-up where you're essentially pitching one product, in a VC you're pitching as many partners as are in the VC, right? So it made sense for them at the time. They already had a comms function in their HQs in California and wanted that in Europe. So after working at Accel for about a year, and having developed a very privileged view of what are the trends, like the categories that are growing fast and the tech hubs across Europe that are drawing attention and investment, I jumped ships again and joined iZettle, which today is called Zettle. They're a mobile payments company, and they are based in Sweden. They've been bought by PayPal since, but I joined them right after they raised a Series B round, and I helped them launch in Mexico and Brazil, which was a lot of fun.
Did you get to go to these places?
Not only did I get to go, but I was like running the show for the
Nice.
for these experiential launches in Mexico City and Sao Paulo. So it was a whole vibe.
Nice.
And I also gained like new market experience, like emerging market experience there. So yeah, after this journey, and I gave you as quick as I could of a walkthrough, I wanted a structural change. I wanted something deeper and different than just changing and working for another brand. And it's at that stage that I moved to Lisbon before anyone understood why. This was late 2014, and started freelancing for a handful of startups. I was quite well networked after 6 or 7 years in London, and so I was quickly able to get my hands busy with a few startups. And then in 2016, I founded Third Eye Media. And the reason that I founded the agency as well, just from freelancing, I saw there was a huge gap in the market for, multilingual, multi-market PR. What you realize is that one of the headaches to scale in Europe is how fragmented the ecosystem is, culturally, regulation-wise, legally. And also, these media landscapes tend to be quite local. I don't want to say provincial, but they're quite national. And so coming in with a service where you're able to bridge the linguistic and cultural gap from a branding and messaging perspective for startups is really game-changing. So, yeah. And lastly, maybe I can add the name Third Eye Media.
Yes, that's a very good way.
Yeah, because I get asked a lot about that.
Yeah.
So for our listeners out there, the third eye is the center of intuition. So it's really, energetically, it's the seer of the unseen. And in PR, I think that translates into sort of spotting the potential, the latent potential before anyone else, spotting an angle that someone might not have seen.
Yeah.
Or even identifying the potential for a story or storytelling that a journalist might not have seen. Yeah, exactly.
And was that how did you arrive at this name? Was it something that you always had in mind, the third eye?
So that's a great question as well. In my personal life, I am also yoga teacher trained. So I've done 500 hours of yoga teacher training, and I taught yoga for about 4 years. So the energy body is something that I think about a lot and was teaching in class. So the name Third Eye felt quite natural in that I value intuition as a value in business and in personal life. I feel like using these soft skills is very important and usually takes you in the right places.
Definitely. So we'll jump to the next one. So working with an established giant like Wise and Sore is vastly different from handling an early stage portfolio company. What is the biggest core variable that changes when you're building a narrative for a global giant versus a startup trying to break out of stealth?
Great question. So interestingly, there are some differences and there's also some similarities. So let me start with the similarities. I think, in PR, what makes a good story is if you can answer in a compelling way, why should I pay attention to you, and why now, right? That's what makes the story hot and sort of gives the FOMO to the reporter of like, all right, I've got to write this or I'm missing the boat, right? So that will always be true, no matter how young or large you are as a company. Where it differs is that with an established company, you tend to be actually, the narrative is already established, the brand already has a voice, and so what you're really doing is directing the narrative. And a lot of the work is managing inbounds and sort of prioritizing the company's time and energy. And what I mean by that is that, if you're already a scale up with, say, like 200 to 500 employees, you're already established in the market. You're going to get requests for interviews, you're going to get requests for speaking opportunities. And part of your job is going to be to field them and say, are they aligned with the campaigns, the key messaging, and the positioning that we're directing the company in, right?
Yeah.
Versus when you're an early stage startup, well, you're really starting from zero. So the job is more, engineering relevance, going from nobody knows you, nobody's ever written about you, and possibly your founder has no sort of public footprint in the media.
From scratch.
Exactly. To, who's this founder? What's his story? Why should I pay attention to this product? What makes it unique? Why should I care?
Completely different. Like the scale ups or the global giants in this case already have some kind of footprint that they can build on, and then the startup is pretty much just starting out and building their own name and their own name in the space.
Exactly.
What would you say is the biggest pain point for an early stage startup when it comes to PR?
So I almost want to share 2 points here. I think the first point that's very common with a startup founder is like, what's the right time to start doing PR? Like, how long can I live without having to pay for PR? It kind of thing. And viewing the PR exercise as a whole as something very transactional. It's like, all right, let me wait, and then I have a press release, and I can just push it out and secure coverage, and then job done. When actually the question should be reframed as in like, how soon can I start leveraging this this additional tool to build my brand and my voice? And it's almost like a law of attraction, right? Because once you have that activated, you do start getting inbounds and clients. It creates authoritativeness, it creates relevance, it creates discoverability, and that translates into anything like a junior VC person who's tasked with discovering the new early stage startups and bringing them to the deal meeting on a Monday morning to his partners, all the way to the the partner or the client who wouldn't have discovered you, but discovers you in the media by Googling specific terms. So that's the first answer. The second answer, kind of in the wake of this, is to say a lot of startups, again, will think that getting a press release out is like the high and the peak, and that's basically what PR consists of. And, from my stance, there's a big missed opportunity actually just in the wake of this press release. That's the moment where you have momentum that can really be leveraged and translated into, you become very pitchable. Right? Like you've just announced a funding announcement, or you've just launched out of beta something very compelling and really addressing a pain point in the market. So you're very pitchable, and that's when you can score, speaking opportunities for your clients. That's where like an opinion piece will be of high relevance. Somebody who's just received funding, or somebody who's just expanded his company into 4 or 5 markets. We really want to know what that person has to say about their industry. So these are tactics that can be really leveraged in the wake of a big press release, let's say.
This one is a very interesting one, and initially it's like when you mentioned YOLO to me, I had a different idea to it, but I think the listeners want to also know what you mean by YOLO. So if you are an early stage startup right now, how do you even start with PR? What's the playbook looking like?
Yeah, so this is what I say to my clients. I say YOLO. And what I mean is you only launch once.
Yeah.
So it's the only moment in the story, of your company where you're going to go from there's absolutely no footprint to there's now a media footprint. It's the only moment. Any other follow-up announcement you do later, you're no longer in that position, right? So the first time you go out to the media, the recommendation is really to do it right. So, what's your founding story? People want to know that. Oh, I was on the street and it occurred to me that there was no solution for XYZ, and then, I created that app or whatever. Like, there's got to be a foundational story that's compelling there. Who's this entrepreneur who came up with this story? What's his journey? Is he a repeat entrepreneur, or what did he study? Again, like, linked to the foundational story. Like, who is this founder, or who are these founders? Because sometimes it's multiple founders. Nuts and bolts for the media sounds so obvious once you said it, but like having a clean, polished media kit with, portraits and logos of the founders, portraits and bios of the founders, having company logos in different shapes and forms, having product screenshots, having team photos if they exist, an about the company paragraph that's, clean, consistent with the website, consistent with the sales brochures, et cetera, when you're going out to media. And then lastly, when you're pushing out your first press release, and it might be, again, a launching out a beta or a seed funding type press release, really try to tie that to the trends going on in your market. You want to show that even if you're a David in a world of Goliaths, you understand Goliath extremely well, and your angle is inserted extremely in a very smart way into your market. So, whether it's like showing that you're disrupting a market that's this size, or that there's a lot of solutions for this particular market that go in this direction, but yours is a contrarian solution that's flipping the problem on its head and sort of tackling it from a different way. So again, we go back to the questions that I was saying earlier are common to a startup or a later stage company, which is, who are you? What do you do? What's new? And why should I care? And then this why now, which is going to give the FOMO to the reporter.
Exactly. I think also, speaking of FOMO, because you mentioned earlier about the founding story, which I think is also very important. Like when you're launching, like the YOLO concept of you only launch once. I feel like one thing I always tell founders is that it's very important for people to connect with your story, right? And the story behind the product is worth more than any amount of ads you run on the campaigns or anything. If people can be able to see beyond the product and see the people, see the person behind the product, powerful. Even more powerful if the product was built or created from a position where the founder had some kind of a personal experience that they're trying to solve with that product. So, just creating that kind of situation where the founder can, project their solution to the end user via their product, because, they had XYZ issue and they're putting forward the product, to the global audience to also take advantage of that solution. I feel like that is one of the ways that people connect to products the most.
I can see, all your back, what you just said, and I completely agree. And what I'd say to my clients, again, in these types of situations, encourage them to share more about their personal stories. People trust people. Exactly. People buy from people. People don't trust products. And like, again, for example, it's an overused example, but with Steve Jobs, why did we all switch to iPhones when they first came out? Because it was sensational, the way he presented on stage, and everybody was bought. We all trusted, it was basically literally almost maybe the first keynote we saw. This one-man band on stage unveiling the most extraordinary miniature computer that you can put in your pocket. And, all of us were sold, right? And so that's an example. We're not buying the product. We're trusting the person.
Exactly. You're right on that. Think different.
Yes.
You often advocate for, I like this one actually. I think it's a very interesting one. So essentially about, kicking off in English, even if you are not living in an English-speaking country. So you often advocate for European founders pitching to secure media coverage in English as early as possible, even if they are based in France or Germany or a non-English-speaking country. Why does English coverage have a tenfold compounding effect on a company's global footprint, growth, and fundraising?
Yeah, it is. It is a really interesting question, and something I discuss a lot with my founders on the continent, so in non-English countries. And you know, what I say there is that operating exclusively in your home native language, it's going to artificially cap your company's valuation potential. And the reason is that the minute you switch to also securing coverage in English, your audience immediately becomes global. That's the first thing.
Yeah.
The other layer is that when you get coverage in English, it signals to the market that your product has the potential to go exactly to scale and to appeal to a global audience. And I think one of the things we try to do for our clients is to say, you know, we understand how to signal to the market that your company has this potential to go global. This is why we offer multilingual announcements. So if you're a French startup and you're raising funding, say from a French VC and a Spanish VC, we're going to recommend that you do a funding announcement in 3 languages. We're going to recommend that you announce in France. We're going to recommend that you leverage the Spanish angle. What has appealed to these Spanish investors? What's the markets like for your industry in Spain, et cetera, crafting that angle and using probably the Spanish VC partner as a spokesperson to explain the potential of this French company in Spain and create that local angle. And we're going to also recommend that you push out your announcement in English because by definition, there's a global audience, global interest, and global appetite for VC activity, no matter where it comes from. And so you will be able to secure coverage in English.
Right, right. But if you, I mean, just to follow up on that, if you had a budget of 100%, for example, how would you split it between your local language and English?
So it will all depend on whether you have actually ongoing activities in an English-speaking country or not. If you don't, the recommendation would be keep your PR dollars in your homegrown markets for ongoing PR. But then when you have news like milestones that will appeal to a global audience, such as VC activity, expansion, acquisitions, things like that, then make sure that your press release also goes out to English-speaking outlets. And an example that I can give for this is, last year in the spring of 2025, we worked with a legal tech startup, Legora, which now has turned into a unicorn. At the time, we were asked to support them with their rebrand and Series B announcement. And so the first thing I did with this Scandinavia-based legal tech company was to say, what's your geographic footprint? Like, where do you have clients, operations, reach, country managers, any of a mix and match of what I've asked? And to strongly recommend, which they followed, to issue the press release in as many markets as they had an angle. And, again, case in point, what that does is that it signals amongst all the legal tech startups that are applying AI to make the job of legal, processes easier. Of all of those startups, one of them has a Series B with coverage in 6 languages and markets in Europe and an echo in the US. That makes a huge difference. And it really did in the market because less than 18 months later, they were valued at, over $1 billion. They became a unicorn.
Unicorn, yeah. Nice. Okay. How do you continue to appear in the media? This is a good one. How do you continue to appear in the media once you've done a big launch or when you have nothing to announce?
Right. So first of all, I think that's like kind of the bread and butter of PR because especially with early stage startups, you honestly don't have that much to announce, right? You can have a press release every maybe 6 months or sometimes 12 months. So it's really understanding that you're going to have to find strategies to create a regular footprint for companies outside of press releases. And so you do that by moving from a news-driven agenda to sort of an authority-driven agenda. Earlier, we were talking about that missed opportunity in the wake of a press release. This is exactly what we're on about here, which is, between news or in the wake of like a compelling industry announcement, it's the moment where you can leverage that to, produce opinion pieces. So these are, articles that are signed by the founder or the country manager, et cetera, that kind of share the person's opinion of the market, where it's going, or what you should be looking out for. It can be a mix of advice, pronostics, or kind of like a bold opinion or a contrarian opinion about the industry, and try to get those published on the regular. We talked about speaking opportunities. I think those are great. I recently also wrote a piece about the difference between getting on a panel versus getting a keynote. So again, keynotes are huge signals to the market because you're standing on the main stage usually.
Sharing your opinions about
sharing your opinions, and you're relevant enough to be alone on stage. And you're relevant enough to be, essentially discussing by yourself your industry, right? Rather than having to share opinions with other people, et cetera.
So what would you say is more relevant for, at the early stage of a startup for a founder? Would it be keynotes or panel discussions?
I think you have to work your way up to keynotes.
Right.
So, they tend to have more value or be perceived as more valuable for the reasons I was just explaining. But I think panels at the beginning are great. These things are also really good for SEO.
Exactly.
Because you're then on, an event's website with your name, the name of your company associated with other brands.
Well.
And there's a peak activity of visits around the event, which also signals relevance to the algos. So it's also really good in different layers. There's other things you can do to profile between press releases. And ironically, one of them is podcasts. So podcasts are great, as you will know, because you're running one, because they are consumable in a different format, audio or video, and they're highly reusable on social channels. So they're also great. They're quite versatile.
Right. So next one is, if a founder is listening to this right now, which I hope they are listening to it right now, and planning their growth strategy for the next 6 to 12 months, what is the one counter-intuitive piece of advice about modern public relations you want them to write down now?
Yeah, so something counterintuitive for early stage startups that kind of have PR at the back of their mind is, I would say, like, you should probably be starting with PR before you think you should. And by that I mean, for example, if you're wanting to reach out only when you're going to close your seed announcement to get a press release out for your seed announcement, a little bit of PR right before that or in the run-up to the seed funding announcement can make a huge difference. If you put yourself in the shoes of a reporter in a newsroom, on any given day, they're probably receiving 3 to 5 press releases for seed funding announcements, right? And they might not have the bandwidth to cover them all because there's a massive Series C and some kind of merger acquisition happening. They also have to cover that day, so they're going to have to choose, right, who they can cover. Maybe it's 2 out of the 5 or 3. If you happen in this batch of 5 press releases to have 1 or 2 very well-crafted profile pieces, even in a small blog, it's going to create a differentiator.
Right.
It's going to make you look like one to watch. These ones already have a footprint compared to all the others. So it can create that tipping point in your favor. And I think this is what we mean by media attracts more media. It's literally that. It's like having coverage signals relevance and attracts more coverage.
Right. So, in your opinion, what would you say is that middle point between marketing and PR?
So first, let me just answer the question, what's the difference between the two? Because then you can see where the meeting point is. In my mind, because, there's many definitions, I assume, but in my mind, PR is reputation management. So in reputation management, you have creating the voice and face and the storytelling and the narrative, and then protecting that along the way of the growth of the company. And marketing, on the other hand, is sales. It's a way to sell the product, right? So you're promoting it. You're like kind of putting forth its advantages, what the person might gain from it. You can also create a sort of a experiential story about how you'll feel with this product, etc., all in the aim of selling it. And so I think the meeting point is that both functions of the company are looking in the same direction, which is, having a good reputation builds trust so that it helps sell. So both of them are useful. And I think the meeting point is this trust factor.
I'm sure some people will come for you marketing and sales, like there's a lot of conversations on LinkedIn these days. Like you just go and you scroll and like marketing sales are like going neck and neck. They are very, very, there's a fine line between marketing and sales. But the way I see marketing is you are trying to understand your ICP, your ideal customer profile, right? You're trying to know how they think, the demography, the psychography, how they think. You want to understand them in detail, and then you position the product, right, based on the problems they're having, based on the wants, based on their goals, right? So marketing is just being able to understand the product from that perspective first, then understanding the market, right? And then what happens is through proper positioning, you can now say that, you have been able to achieve product market fit because the product has the solutions it's offering and the market has the goals, has the problems that they're trying to solve. And then you link those two up and then, you launch. So I think marketing is pretty much more of that. And then sales takes it from that fit.
Exactly.
And then starts to sell. I think the middle part is as trust, which you mentioned, cuts across different industries, different facets of business, right? Like just being able to establish trust on several levels. I think trust, like you mentioned, reputation management for PR is very important. And having worked in a PR agency much earlier in my life, not like I'm so old, but having worked in PR, I know how there can be a lot of topsy-turvy when there is a slight dent on the image of that business or of that company.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think you've pretty much nailed it with trust, and I just wanted to just make some notes on
I think
marketing.
It's really interesting because what you're, also what I'm hearing in your explanation of marketing,
Yes.
by sort of really shoehorning in on your, in tech you would call him the super user, but your client, right? With a lot of minutia, you're almost like preparing the grounds to hand over to sales and say, okay, this is your person you're going after, now go do it.
Exactly.
So what I was saying by sales is like the focus is more on preparing to be able to transact and have people engage with the product, whereas on the PR side, it's really more managing that reputation.
We are seeing a massive shift in how people find information with the rise of AI search tools like ChatGPT, Gemini, and Perplexity. Traditional SEO is changing. How does a startup PR strategy directly impact how AI models rank and cite their brand?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question, and it's actually been one of my primary areas of focus right now lately, looking at how LLMs, large language models, are impacting, affecting, or even boosting PR. And so in doing a bit of research, I realized there was actually a really interesting academic article that had come out, I think it's in late 2023, by Princeton, Georgia Tech, and IIT Delhi. And what these guys were looking at was the effect of authoritative and verified web pages in LLMs. And what they realized is that if you have, if you are cited, as in if you appear in verified or authoritative pages or perceived as such by traditional search engines, your visibility and discoverability in LLMs can go up by up to 40%. So this is huge. So what it means in terms of PR is that if you were not convinced that PR had value, with sort of the old web system, you're now realizing that it's essential. What's happening is that in the old days, we would explain to our clients that, the difference between a paid ad or something you're putting on your social channels and an article is that the article is third-party advocacy. It's somebody else than yourself who's running the article, right? So, because we get asked that, right? Like people ask us, well, what's the difference between me putting it on LinkedIn and, this appearing in the media? It's the same thing. I'm putting out the message. Well, there's that effect of third-party advocacy. You've been filtered through, the journalist deemed your press release newsworthy and then covered it, right?
Right.
What's happening now is there's this extra layer. The LLMs are actually an extra layer. They're like a fourth-party advocate. So what they're doing is they're actually crawling all of the hard work and results that you've put into traditional SEO and surfacing it into LLMs. So there's a real compound effect here where every dollar that you put into PR and to achieving visibility, in the press and, podcasts, et cetera, as we were saying, is now also yielding value and discoverability in LLMs, which is amazing.
I think AEO is also something that is also coming up now. So like you search on Google, and then you have those answers that just come up with even before you even click on any of the blue links. And I think like all those posts or articles that come up at the top is also based on how you structure those blog articles as well. Like how are you answering the questions? How are you able to prefer solutions to questions that people are constantly asking? Is also something that is, I would say that companies or startups should also be very, very should pay attention to when they're creating these articles, because just to give some context here, right? When you create an article these days and you want it to rank properly on, let's say, LLMs or your AEO, like when you search for it on Google, it's always a good idea, and it's like a tip for for people who also want to rank properly on AEO, is that you create the article to answer a question. You create the article to solve a problem and not just to create it for the sake of it, right? So you create it from the perspective of what is the end user trying to find when they go on Google, and then you reverse engineer that question and you prepare solutions, and that's pretty much how you can also rank.
That's really interesting. That's a really interesting insight. I was I was of the mind that the rules of traditional SEO still apply, and I think that's still true, as in making sure that the terminology you're using is associated exactly. Those keywords are associated exactly with the industry you're in, and so forth and so on. But what you've just said about crafting an article in such a way that it answers an actual question is completely in line with user behavior, because we've really gone from putting in a keyword into Google to now formulating a full question to pull some information from. So that's really great insights.
Yeah, Yeah, and also one more tip is to also make sure that when you're creating these articles, you are doing them in like a bullet pointed kind of way. So like very very straightforward and sharp answers that the the AI can quickly crawl through the articles to fetch those informations. All right, where can founders and VCs find you to learn more about rewriting the narrative playbook, and how can they tune into Third Eye Media's work?
Yeah, so I mean, we have a LinkedIn page. I also have my own personal LinkedIn page. We have our website, thirdeyemedia.press, and we have an Instagram handle, which is at Third Eye Media PR.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Clara, for being on the podcast with me. It has been amazing and educative and a masterclass as well. How's it been for you?
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed our conversation. Thanks again for inviting me over.
Thank you.